Hey guys, Jasmine here from Feeling Nifty Painting Tutorials. Today you're going to learn how to paint this beautiful, enchanting sea turtle scene. And so we're going to start that off right now. We're going to pick up our flat brush, our big flat brush, and we're just going to mix a little bit of the aqua green with white to lighten it up. So I'm just going to grab my palette knife and mix in just a little bit of white into the aqua green. So we have a nice lighter version of it. Just like that. Then we're going to put our palette knife down, pick up our brush, we're going to wet it in water, and then we're going to pick up some of that light aqua green paint color, and then we're just going to use these back and forth strokes to apply that paint at the top part of our canvas. So we're going to paint that about, let's say, 2 to 3 inches down from the top, and then we're going to blend with pure aqua green in the middle of the canvas in the next step. So we're just going to apply that nice, beautiful color. I recently painted my nails this color. Nice summery, beachy vibe. And then once you've painted about 2 to 3 inches down from the top of the canvas, we're going to apply some pure aqua green in the middle of the canvas. So we're just going to add a little bit more on our canvas, not too much. And we're going to clean off our brush. So we want this paint still to be wet because we're going to be blending. And then we're going to pick up some of this aqua green paint. And then we're just going to continue where we left off with the lighter version. And we're going to use these back and forth strokes. And we're going to bring that up into that lighter green so it blends really well. So we're using these gentle back and forth strokes like this, and that's really going to blend that paint and create those even gradients. Then we're going to pick up more paint. We'll run out of that paint on our brush, and we're going to bring it down to about until there's about 2 to 3 inches left from the bottom of the canvas. So this is the middle portion of the underwater scene. So it's going to be a little bit darker than the top because the top part of the canvas is like the water line at the top. So it's going to be a little bit lighter, and then it's going to be a little bit darker in the middle, then the darkest at the bottom. Okay, and I've run out of paint, so I'm just going to add a little bit more on my palette, just like that. And with blends like this, you want to make sure you're working with wet paint. So you want to work pretty fast with acrylics because acrylics do dry really fast as well. So once you've gotten to that, you have 2 to 3 inches left at the bottom, you want to take now some ultramarine blue, pure ultramarine blue, and we're going to add that to our palette. Not too much because we have just a little bit of the canvas left to paint. And without cleaning off our brush, we're going to pick up some of that pure ultramarine blue, and we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to use those horizontal back and forth strokes to where we left off, and then we're going to bring it up into that pure aqua green, so we blend those two colors together and we create those seamless blends. And then when you run out of paint, you're just going to pick up a little bit more. And when you don't clean off the brush with the previous color, it helps with blending as well, so you're getting a little bit of both the colors. So you get a little bit of an evener blend, if that's even a word, evener. Okay. So I'm just going to grab a little bit more of that ultramarine blue. Just like that. So it's going to be nice and dark at the bottom, and I'm just going to bring it up so it blends a little bit more into that aqua green. And since the paint is still wet, it's still very workable, so you can create those blends. And once you're happy with your under the sea background, we're going to wait for this to dry, and then we're going to move on to the next step, which is going to be creating some beautiful sunbeams shining into the underwater scene. So once your background is dry to the touch, we're going to paint some nice, beautiful sunbeams shining into our underwater scene. So to do that, we're just going to take a little bit of the pure titanium white and we're going to water it down so it's like really thin, because we want those sunbeams to be a little bit translucent to make them look as natural as possible. So I just have a little mini mister here, so I'm going to mist my water, but you can simply just take your paintbrush, grab some water from your water jar, and just add some drops of water into your white paint. That. I'm going to take my palette knife and just mix it. So you want it like pretty liquid. So it's nice and fluid, a nice soupy consistency. And then once it's nice and fluid, we're going to take our smallest flat brush. This is the 1/2-inch flat brush. And just to give nice straight lines, you can just freehand it, but I'm just going to use a ruler just to get some nice straight lines. But again, you can just freehand it. So we're going to pick up some of that pure titanium white that's watered down. And then we're just going to create right from the center. So we want the sunbeams coming from the center of the canvas and fanning out towards the center of the canvas, the middle of the canvas, sorry. So we're just going to start like, we'll start with the center one, which goes like that. And we can stop about halfway or a little bit below halfway like that. And then we're going to make them kind of fan out. I want to keep them, oops, a little bit equal on both sides if you can. And then if you find that they're too opaque, you can go ahead and water down that paint a little bit more. Or what you can do is, if you have a Q-tip, you can blend it a little bit, make them not so opaque. So you can just blot it a bit. But it's okay if it's a little bit, it's just going to be in the background. The turtle is going to cover up most of it, so there we go. And then we're going to continue that across canvas, and it's all going to be radiating from that center point in the middle of your canvas there. This one I didn't really, it's all right, we can just work with that. So if you find some of them are a little bit and maybe another one over here. You can also use the side of your brush to get thinner lines as well. Okay, so I'm happy with that. So once you've gotten your nice sunbeams in the water, we're gonna wait for this to dry, and then we're gonna move on to the next step, which is creating the waves at the top of our canvas. All right, now once the sunbeams are dried to the touch, we're going to now create these water lines at the top of our canvas. So that's the top of the water. So the sea turtle is kind of floating right to the top of the water. So we're going to be creating these waves. So to do that, we're going to create a mixture of the aqua green and the ultramarine blue. So we want to grab just a little bit of the ultramarine blue because we want to darken it just a little bit, not too much. We don't want to overpower that, that aqua green. So we're just going to mix that in to create a darker version of the aqua green. So the key with mixing colors is apply a little bit at a time. That way you can control what your colors look like a little bit easier without having to overcorrect. So we want a nice, we basically want enough contrast between that aqua green that's on the canvas at the top right there and this color, so we can actually see the waves. So that's a nice color there. Now we're going to pick up our medium-sized round brush, make sure it's nice and moist in the water, and then we're going to pick up some of that darkened aqua green, the tip of our brush, and then we're just going to create some waves at the top. So we're just going to create these nice swooshy lines. Just think of waves and your hand will know what to do. that. And we want to paint them about, I would say 2 inches from the top. That's going to be the top of our water. There. Some could be a little bit longer, some could be shorter waves. It could be calm waters, it could be maybe wavy waters, whatever you're feeling. That, and then in the next step, we're going to come and highlight these waves with some white paint, which is just going to kind of bring them to life. So you can pick up some of the pure ultramarine green and also create some varying shades of those waves if you'd like as well. So it's nice to have a different variety of different colors and shades and tints when painting. It makes things look more realistic. So we're just creating those nice top waves, having fun here, going with the flow. I love puns, so I hope you do too. Do that. Fill some more at the top here. And then once you're happy with the amount of waves you've added in, now we're going to wait for this to dry because we want to add those white highlights on the waves. And if we add them right now, the white is going to blend into that color and then we're not going to get those crisp highlights. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab a hairdryer to make it faster, the drying time faster. Okay, so now we're going to pick up our small detailing brush. Once the top part of the waves are dry, we're going to pick up our small detailing brush, and then we're going to pick up a little bit of pure white. So if you have any white left on your palette, you're just going to pick that up. And then we're going to add the highlights to the top of each wave because the sunlight is hitting down on the water, and the highlights often they hit on the top of anything that the light first hits. So we're just going to paint the top part of the wave. So you can see there's a big stroke there, but I'm adding the white just to the top part of it. And you don't have to paint the white all the way along the wave. You can just do portions of it. That. So it just gives that nice realistic wave. A nice sunny, beautiful sunny day on the ocean. You just imagine that. I want to be there right now. I can't remember the last time I was by the ocean. Like that. So we'll do that on, and if you get a little bit extra, you can just wipe it off. So you can do that on all the waves. You can go along most of it. You can go along just some of them. Whatever you'd like. And you're going to see, once you step a little bit back from your painting, you're going to see that it creates a really nice realistic looking waves. Here. You can always use your Q-tip. If you find some of them a little bit chunky or not like too much white, you can just use your Q-tip to correct. I love keeping a Q-tip close by, especially with painting and acrylic paint, because they do dry. Acrylic does dry really fast. So when you have something that you're like, oops, you can just quickly take a Q-tip and wipe it off. While acrylic is wet, you can always like just wipe it. So that's a great thing with acrylics. And even if it dries, you can always paint over top. So there's always a way to correct things. So never stress out. Okay. So once you're happy with, add a little bit more to that one. So once you're happy with the waves at the top of your canvas, we're going to wait for that to dry. And then we're going to move on to painting in our majestic sea turtle. Now, once your background is dry to the touch, we're going to now sketch in our sea turtle to begin with. Now, if you don't want to sketch, you can definitely freehand it with the paint, so you can skip to the painting portion. But I like to sketch things in first because it just then gets proportions and the shapes and everything a little bit more accurate. So to start things off, we're going to grab a ruler and a pencil, and we're going to draw in kind of a diagonal line, and we want it to be about, if you're using the 9x12 canvas like me, we're going to be drawing that diagonal line about 17 inches long from a little bit below where that wave stops there. So we're going to draw, and we can draw it on a diagonal either going to the right or left, whichever you'd like. So 17 inches like that, and you want it to be fairly centered. It can be a little bit off on either side, it won't make a big deal. So 17 inches diagonal, and then we're going to make a cross right through it, and that's going to be about 11 inches wide. So that's 17 and this one's 11, and we want to do it about in the middle portion. So it's going to be about half of 17. I have to do math. 17, 16 would be 8. So 8.5 would be the midway point. Now we're going to do this one around 11, just like that. And then we're going to draw like a star shape, like a X right through it too, because that's going to give us our guidelines. And these ones you can just draw as long as you want, because we're going to erase the top and bottom portions. That's just going to give us a guideline of where the flippers are going to go for our sea turtle. Just like that. So those can be however long they need to be. And that's just going to be basically our guide to help us draw the turtle a little bit more symmetrically. So now what we're going to do is we're going to draw the top part of the turtle shell. So we're going to draw it about 3.5 inches down from that top part, 3.5 inches like that. And we're just going to draw a straight line, and it's going to be about 4 to 5 inches. So we're just going to draw one like that. Okay, so that's going to be the top part of our turtle shell. And now to create the turtle shell, it's going to be the general shape of sea turtle shells is kind of like an oval or a spear or like a heart shape. So what we're going to do is we're just going to create a nice curve, and we're going to go to the end of that horizontal line that we drew, and then we're going to come all the way down to that bottom part of the line we drew. And kind of like we're going to draw it like a heart or spear shape. So it comes to a tapered point at the bottom. And we're going to do the same thing for the other side. So that's the thing with drawing. It's nice to have these guidelines, so it keeps things nice and symmetrical. And then also with a pencil you can erase. So you find your shape is a little bit looking like a little bit wonky. Take a good old eraser and erase, and then you can make it a little bit more rounded like that. So it's a nice spear shape. So the next step we're going to do is we're going to create the turtle head. Now the turtle head is just going to be a simple rectangle, so we're just going to create these two lines on either side of the center line, and then I'm going to make it come up like that. And then we're going to create little divots for where the eyes are going to go. So two little swoops like that on either side. And then the snout of our turtle is going to be a little bit rounded. So we're going to just round it at the top like that. And then we're just going to fill in where those eyes go. So it's going to be nice rounded eyes like that. So that's our turtle head. Now the next step is we're going to draw in our flippers, our front flippers and our bottom flippers. Now we know where they're going to go because we have that
crisscross shape right through our guideline. So that's gonna make it really easy. So we're just gonna take our pencil here, and we're going to just create these nice flipper-like shapes. And it's going to be just a long line like that, and then you're going to come in on a diagonal and then go right back in and connect it to the shell of our sea turtle. We're going to do the same thing for the other side, roughly keeping it the same size, but it doesn't have to be perfect. Things in nature are not perfect, so let's remember that. There. Now it's easy to say and harder to, I find it hard myself too sometimes. I get stuck in that. I want things to look real perfect. Okay, so there's our front flippers, and now we're gonna do our bottom flippers. So it's kind of hard maybe to see the line on canvas because it's the darker paint at the bottom, but we're basically, the bottom flippers are gonna be kind of like the shell shape, where they're gonna be much shorter than the front flippers. They're gonna be like little spears. So we're gonna take our pencil, and we're just gonna draw little short spears, spear-like shapes for our bottom flippers. I'm gonna take that bottom guideline to help us with that. The overall shape, the overall area where we want them, like that. So that's the overall shape of our sea turtle. And now what we're going to do is, now we can actually go ahead and paint that in. But before we paint it in, we're just going to erase our guideline. So we don't need that anymore. I'm gonna erase it. And we're gonna paint over it. There's our sea turtle. And now we're going to grab some paint and paint in our sea turtle. So now that we have our sketch of our sea turtle done with our pencil, we're going to paint in the shell, the base of our shell first. So to do that, we want a nice dark green. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab some phthalo green and just a smidgen of black. We don't want to darken it too much, but we want that nice and dark as the base of our shell, sea turtle shell. So we're going to mix in I just grabbed a dab of that black. So it's a nice, deep, rich green. Okay, and once you've mixed it up, we're going to grab our medium-sized round brush, grab some of that paint on it, and we're just going to fill in that sea turtle shell. Have you guys ever seen a sea turtle? If you have, let me know. I don't think I ever have in the wild. I might have seen them in a zoo or an aquarium, but I don't think I've ever seen a sea turtle live in action in its natural habitat. That'd be something neat to see. So we're just going to use simple strokes like that just to apply the dark green to our shell, and we're going to use our pencil sketch as just a guideline. You can go over that pencil sketch too. And then in the next step, we're going to come in and paint with a nice, we're going to create a really beautiful neon green to paint the skin of the turtle, the base of the skin. Drawing a turtle or painting a turtle seems quite overwhelming sometimes because there's so many different parts to it. But with drawing anything, the best thing to do is break it up into simple shapes, and then you can draw anything pretty much once you break it up into simple shapes. Just notice, if you're drawing from still life, it's good to just notice what the shapes look like and then just kind of jot those down, and then it all just kind of comes together. Go. So once you have nice coverage
of your sea turtle shell with that nice dark green. We're going to wait for that to dry. And then while we wait for that to dry, we can actually mix our next color. We can multitask here. All right, we're gonna put that in water to wait so the brush doesn't dry out with the paint. And we're gonna mix our nice neon green, which we're gonna be using. I'm just gonna look up the mixture here. It's ultramarine blue, mix some yellow with a smidgen of ultramarine blue. Okay, so we're gonna take some yellow, some cadmium yellow medium hue. Just a little bit, we don't need that much. What I find challenging is sometimes I put too much paint on my palette and then some of it goes to waste. So I'm trying to add small amounts at a time. So we have a little bit of that yellow, and then we're gonna add just a smidgen of the ultramarine blue, because with mixtures of any kind, we wanna add just a little bit at a time so we don't overpower that mixture. We're gonna clean off our palette knife here. Okay, and then we're gonna just take a little dab of it on the edge of our palette knife, and we're going to mix that in with our yellow. So I think I've added a little bit too much even. So I'm going to show you here how to lighten it. You just grab a little bit more of the yellow if you find it's a little bit too dark, and we're just going to mix that in so we have a nice vivid neon green. Neon green-ish, doesn't have to be exact neon green. There we go. That's a nice vivid color. So once you're happy with that, we're going to, we're gonna wait for, actually we don't have to wait for the shell to dry. We can just move on to the next step, because we're gonna be painting in the flippers of our sea turtle, which is not really going to affect the turtle shell. So let's see what brush we're using here. Let's grab our medium-sized round brush, which we used for the shell. I'm gonna clean it off so there's none of that dark green color on it. So we're swish, swish, swish in our water jar. Pick up some of that really beautiful green, and then we're just gonna fill in our flippers with that pencil sketch we created in the earlier steps. Now, yellow paint is a little bit translucent. So when you add yellow to any paint mixture, you might find that the nature of that paint that you're applying is a little bit see-through. So for that, what we might do here, if we find it a little bit see-through on the first coat, we're just gonna wait for it to dry and then add a second coat, and then it should be a little bit more opaque. Because in this mixture, there's way more yellow than there was green. And you can actually see the opacity. So basically, we're just gonna, before I get to that, we're gonna fill in all the flippers and the head with this green color. So the opacity of any paint, if you just flip around your paint bottle, you can see the companies, the paint companies often tell you how opaque or how translucent a paint is. So this one here is semi-opaque. So it has some coverage, definitely. You can see, you can't see right through it, but it is not completely opaque. And another trick, if you want to make something a little bit more opaque, is to mix in an opaque paint. And one very opaque paint is titanium white. So if you're finding, let's say your yellows are looking a little translucent and you don't want to add a whole bunch of layers, then just mix in just a smidgen of titanium white to see if that changes the translucency of your paint. That's sometimes what I do to get it a little bit more opaque without changing the color too much. You don't want to lighten it sometimes, you just want like a bright color. Just add a smidgen of white. Oh, paint in this other cute little flipper. Sea turtles are so cute. Turtles in general are cute. I haven't seen a sea turtle, but we do have a lot of I don't know if they're called ground turtles, but ground turtles in our area. I've seen them crossing the road. They've actually built a fence along one of the roads they built here to ensure that the sea turtles don't cross, because they want to save them. save their lives. Okay, then we're gonna paint the last flipper up here. And you know, sea turtles, so regular turtles, when you think of them, you can imagine that they put their heads in their shells, and then their basically their shells are their little home they can go into when they want a good night's sleep or if they just need to chill. But for sea turtles, they cannot retract their heads and their legs and flippers into their shell. So that's a little factoid, sea turtle factoid. So it's nice to learn about what you're painting. There you go. Okay, so the flippers, oh, actually we're gonna paint the head in too. So we're gonna paint in the head, and we're just gonna leave the eyes, because the eyes we're gonna come in a later step and we're going to paint that in with like a black paint. So we're just going to go around the eyes and paint the head of our sea turtle. And you can paint as slowly as you'd like, just like a turtle. Go. All right, so now we're done painting the head and all the flippers. Now you can see how, if you find like it's a little bit translucent and you can see like the blue underneath it and you want it to be a little bit more vibrant, then what you're gonna do is you're gonna wait for this to dry. You can either use a hair dryer or you can just wait for it to naturally dry. And then you're gonna come over it with another layer of that yellow paint. And that's what I'm gonna do too, because I'm finding it's a little bit dull. And when it dries, it's gonna be even duller. So I'm gonna wait for it to dry, and then I'm gonna go over it with a second coat of paint. So you can do that, or you can leave it as is and move to the next step. All right, now that our flippers are all painted with that nice neon color green, it can be a little bit wet, and we can move on to the next step, because the next step we're going to create that beautiful pattern on the sea turtle shell. So to do that, we want to create a really nice vibrant and punchy orange. So we're going to grab a little bit of the yellow, the cadmium yellow medium, and just a smidgen of the red. And we're going to add that into the mixture, and that's going to create a nice vibrant orange. So if you added a little bit too much red, then you can just go ahead and add some yellow back into the mixture, but we want a nice vibrant orange. So I'm happy with that. And if you haven't added enough of the red, you can pick up some more and mix that into the mixture. So that's a nice orange. So I'm gonna put down my palette knife, and we're gonna pick up our medium-sized round brush, a little bit smaller than the last step's round brush. And then we're gonna grab some of that nice, beautiful orange paint on our paintbrush. And then we're gonna basically be painting in a border of these irregular rectangular shapes, which are called scoots on the turtle shell. So they're really nicely tightly packed together, but you're gonna still see some of that green below it. It's kind of like gonna be like a mosaic shape, but a nice border of it. So we're just gonna create these irregular rectangular lines and leaving a little bit of space in between each one. So they don't have to be perfect rectangle. I can't say it properly. Rectangles. They don't have to be perfect rectangles. They can be a little bit irregular, but they're just going to be about like, we're just going to do the border around the shelf to begin with, like that. And then we're going to fill in the center of those, that turtle shell in the later steps. So just simply like that. And you might find here, because we've added yellow to the mixture, as we mentioned before, anytime you add yellow to any mixture, it can make it a little bit translucent. So if your orange paint is looking a little bit not as opaque as you like, just wait for this step to dry and then just go over it with a second coat of paint. I'm just gonna paint in these irregular shapes here. Oh, and I have some more factoids for you. So there is a species of sea turtles called the leatherback sea turtles, and they've actually existed in their current form since the dinosaur age, since the prehistoric ages. And they're the largest sea turtles that exist. They're the heaviest reptiles, so they can weigh between 550 pounds to 2,000 pounds and can measure up to 6 feet long. So they're big turtles. I thought that was pretty cool that they have existed in their current form since the prehistoric ages. I don't think anything has really. So they know how to survive those ones, those turtles. And also sea turtles, they nest in the sand. So they spend most of their lives in the water, and they can stay submerged for a very long time, but they do nest on sand. So they come up on the sand and they use their back flippers to create holes, and then they lay their eggs in them. And the actual temperature of the sand determines the sex of the turtle. So warmer sand would result in female turtles, and cooler sand for male turtles. So I thought that was interesting as well. So with the climate change happening, that would definitely could affect actually, not sure, but it could affect the balance of turtle population. All right, so once you've created a nice border around your turtle shell, so we're just going to move on to the next step, which we're going to be creating the center shapes on the turtle's shell, those center scoots. So to do that, so the center ones are going to be like hexagon shapes. So we're going to do basically a line of hexagons, and then surrounding it are going to be like these polygon shapes. So we're going to do a nice center hexagon. So hexagons are these shapes with 6 sides. So 1 on the top, 2 on the bottom, and we're going to do this one right in the center of the shell. So just like that. That's a nice, simple, it doesn't have to be perfect. It can be a little bit irregular too. Just a hexagon like that. Make it a little bit bigger if you'd like. Then we're just going to fill it in with that same orange paint that we created. That. And then we're going to create more of those hexagons. Yeah, we're going to create more of those hexagons. So we're going to paint another one that's a little bit smaller than this. The center one's going to be the biggest one. So we're going to paint another hexagon below it. We're going to leave a little bit of that green between them because these scoots are tightly packed together, but you can definitely still see the shell below it. It's kind of reminiscent of a mosaic pattern. So that's a wonky looking hexagon, but that's all right. And we're going to do another hexagon at the top of the center one, slightly smaller. Like that. And my paint is looking really translucent, so I'm definitely going to come back in a later step and give it a second coat once it's all nice and dried, and so that orange really comes to life. So okay, and then we're going to create some more hexagons all the way to the bottom of our shell and the top of the shell. And if you don't have room, then you can create like a half a hexagon, whatever room you have left. Just do your best here. So have enough room here and they're going to be a little bit smaller than the ones we created, or roughly the same size or a little bit smaller. That.
And the one at the top, I definitely don't have enough room for a full hexagon, so I'm just gonna paint like a part of one, like a half a hexagon. Trigon, 3 sides, no. Probably there's an official name for that. Triangle, probably. All right, there we go. So that's our line of our scoots of on our turtle shell for the center of our shell. And then we're gonna wait for it to dry and then do a second coat if the paint is not opaque enough. Now for the side patterns, they are going to be more polygon shaped, so they're going to have 5 sides instead of 6. So we can do that like that. Another one like there, and then a line going down. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, which is going to go right along that border. So it's going to be one of those scoots. And they're really irregular shapes, so they don't have to be geometric or anything like that. Okay, and then we're going to create another one down here. So we're going to go along that hexagon from the center and just create our shape like that. One, 2, 3, 4, and oops, need a little bit of a Q-tip. I over too close to the edge here. There we go. Nothing a Q-tip can't fix. So we're just going to create these polygon shapes along the entire ring of the remainder of the turtle shell. That's that dark green color. Oh, so you can already see that pattern emerging. And they don't have to be polygons either. Some of the ones that are at the bottom might be difficult to get that 5 sides in, so just do your best. It could be 4 sides. Just irregular shapes, so that the most important thing here is to create that pattern where you have a little bit of space between all of your shapes. There you go. And we're going to do the same. Oh, we're missing one up here. I'm going to do one here. There we go. That. Oh, and I also have, I did a blog post on how to specifically draw a sea turtle. So if you found it a little bit difficult to follow along with the drawing portion of the video, you can look at that blog post I wrote. It has pictures and everything. It's a little bit more clear. I'll link the URL in the description below if you're interested in that. Okay, it's more of 4 sides. See, this one here has only 4 sides, so it's okay. You don't have to make them polygon shape. You can make them as long as they're just they're shapes. As long as they're shapes, that's all good. And we're gonna have 2 more, so we're gonna have one here. Make that as polygon as I can. Just fill it in. A little bit of yellow, orange here. Okay, and then we have one small little space there. Add a tiny one just to fill in that gap. There we go.
Okay, so now we're done the essential pattern on our sea turtle shell. Now, if you want to brighten that up, then we're gonna wait for it to dry, and then we're gonna do a second coat over all those patterns that we created just now. And if you like the coloring of it, then you can skip to the next step. The next step, once our turtle shell is nice and dried, is we're gonna move on to painting a nice leathery mosaic pattern on the turtle's front flippers, back flippers, and head. So I'm gonna show you here what it looks like. And it's basically just an intricate design with some darker green paint that resembles a leathery kind of skin, reptile skin, that you can kind of think of as a mosaic pattern. So we're gonna grab our small detailing brush and a little bit of phthalo green, pure phthalo green on our palette. And we're just gonna grab that on our brush. And then here you can choose to start on any flippers. I'm gonna start on this one right over here, the right one. And basically here, you're just gonna create random shapes. They can be irregular rectangles, it can be lines, they can be circles, as long as they're some sort of shape and they kind of fit together nicely like that mosaic pattern. So I like to work in one line here and then move to the next one, kind of like in rows, but you can choose to work in any manner that you like. So they're fairly small. They're a lot smaller, the pattern, than the outer edge of the turtle shell, so they're nice and intricate, and they don't have to follow any sort of pattern. They can if you'd like. So as long as they kind of just fit together and you can still see that neon green of the skin below it, you're good. So we're gonna do this all the way down to about, we're gonna leave the bottom part of the edge of the flipper without this pattern, but you can go all the way to the edge too if you'd like. So just have fun here. It's a nice relaxing step. So we're gonna be basically essentially repeating this on all the flippers and also the head. So some you can make a little bit bigger, vary the size of some of the patterns. Reload your brush if you need. And then after we're done with all these flippers and the head, we're going to paint in the turtle's eyes, and that's going to complete our turtle, the turtle portion of the painting. And so here I'm going to show you where I'm just stopping about to leave a little bit of the flipper on the edge without the pattern. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add some simple dots like that, just to give it some style there. And then I'm going to move on to this flipper on the other side, and you don't have to create it with the same pattern. So you don't have to get stressed out and try to copy exactly what you did on this flipper. You can just start fresh. So we're done the bottom flippers, the top flippers. Now we're going to move on to the head. So we're going to do the same concept there. And add in some random shapes in a mosaic pattern. add maybe like a little bit of a bigger shape in the middle, kind of like a diamond if you like, or you can just continue with that. Other way, and you know, just add some shapes around it. Go. And then a couple more here. And I'm going to add some dots at the edge of this snout. Snout? I'm not sure. Forget what it's called. Snout, I think. There we go. There. So now we're done with the turtle's skin, and we're going to leave that to dry. And the next step is we're going to come in and paint the eyes, and we're just going to grab a little bit of black paint on our palette, just a little tiny bit. That same brush we used for the skin. Grab that black paint, twirl it in that black paint, and then we're just going to fill in the eyes. And the eyes of a sea turtle are on the sides of its head. So that's why we have them kind of poking out over here. So one eye here. And the other eye on the other side. Then we're gonna wait for that to dry next. We're gonna add some reflection marks in the eyes, so you can tell that it's actually looking in a direction. So once your eyes, every turtle, nice and dry, you're gonna do that tap test to make sure there's nothing on your finger. And for the next step, I'm gonna take a paint pen because I have one. I have one in my paint collection. But if you don't have a paint pen, don't worry. Just grab a little bit of white paint and your finest detailing brush we used for the last step, and you can do the same thing. So you're going to take either your paintbrush loaded with your white paint or your paint pen. And I'm just going to get that paint flowing on this paint marker. And we're going to paint some simple reflection lines in our eyes of our turtle to make it look like it's looking forward or up. So to do that, we're just going to paint a small curved line on the outside border of the eye. So one like that, and then the same on the other side, like that. And if you want, you can add in a little dot or two. One, two. So now it looks like it's looking forward, and you can see that it's nice and rounded too, so it kind of gives that 3D effect. So that is the eyes. Our turtle is complete. And now we're going to move on to creating our bubbles, air bubbles in the water. I'm going to be using the same paint marker here, but again, if you don't have the paint marker, just use your detailing brush loaded with your titanium white paint, and you can achieve the same effect. So what we're going to do is we're just going to be creating simple circles. So I'm going to add one right over here. You can add them as round as you'd like. You can just freehand it, or if you have something that you can trace around, you can do that as well. I'm going to actually swap over to I have a gel pen, which gives a slightly, this is a Jelly Roll white gel pen, and I find that this one actually gives a finer line. So you can see the difference between the paint marker and the gel pen, and I'll link them in the description below so you can take a look. And then you can create some of the air bubbles that are Some are bigger, just vary the size of them to make them look a little bit more realistic. And then to make them look like even more like air bubbles, we're gonna add a little bit of the same thing we did for the eyes. We're just gonna add a little bit of a curved line at the top left corner of each bubble, just like that. So it looks nice and rounded. Done. And next we are going to paint in our seaweed. So to do that, let's grab some, if you have some of your green paint that you've used from the previous step on your palette, this is a good opportunity to use that paint so you don't waste it. So I have a little bit of that dark phthalo green. So I'm going to add a little bit, because I want more of a warmer green. So I'm gonna add a little bit of the yellow on my palette too. And I'm just gonna create varying shades of that, a dark green with light green, and then we're gonna add some seaweed at the bottom here. So I'm gonna take my little bit of black, and I'm gonna first darken it up. And I'll maybe add a little bit, I'm gonna add a little warmer of a green. So I'll add a little bit of the yellow into it too. That, or you can add just the pure phthalo green. That works too, because phthalo greens are a dark green to begin with. So that's a nice one. And I'm gonna grab my medium-sized round brush here, not the detailing one. And just gonna load it up with that dark green paint. And then we're just going to, at the bottom, so we're gonna start at the bottom right, and we're just gonna paint some like nice flowy lines with our brush, and they're gonna come to a nice tapered top. So it's gonna be a little bit thicker at the bottom of the plant, and then you can just flow it out, and then it's gonna be a little bit tapered and thinner at the top. And we're just going to do a few of those lines. So just imagine a plant flowing in the water, and that's how flowy you wanna paint them. So I'll do another one, just have fun here. You can create the next one a little bit shorter, like that, give some varying sizes. And now those are going to be the leaves or the seaweed in the background. Now we want to paint some lighter ones in the foreground to give the illusion of depth. So what we're going to do is we're going to lighten up this green. So I'm going to add a little bit of white to my palette. And I'm going to just take a little portion of that green paint to lighten it up. And I want to definitely create that a little bit more warmer. So I'm going to add a little bit of yellow in there. And we're going to pick up that lighter green. And we're going to create a little bit more of those flowy seaweed lines, leaves. Like that. Some are going to be longer, some are going to be shorter. Just vary the size and the length. Just like that. Some going to be even thinner too. So that's our first seaweed. I want to make another one kind of going out to the side. It up like that. So that's our first part of our seaweed there. Now we're going to move on to creating a really nice pink coral at the bottom. Like kind of the shape of this coral reminds me of like a brain. the pattern of a brain. So we're going to grab some red paint. We're going to add that onto our palette, just a little bit, we don't need that much. And we're going to create a nice pink color with that. So we're going to add white, mix white in with that red to make a nice light pink. kind of like actually the color of her brain too. It's gonna give a nice pop of color. There we go. Now we're gonna grab that same brush, that medium-sized round brush. And this paint can still be drying. We don't have to wait for it to fully dry because we're gonna paint it right beside it. So with this pattern, it's going to radiate from a center point. So let's create the center point right over here. And then it's just gonna be some flowy lines out like that, but then they're gonna have some branches kind of coming out. Kind of almost like tree branches in a way. And then we're going to create one on this side. So we're going to keep it the same size on both sides of that center radiating point. And try to keep it as symmetrical as we can. And we're going to create some more of these little branches. And they're going to start to get, they're going to be shorter than the one before it because it's going to be like a kind of a dome shaped at the end. I'm going to go a little bit higher there. And just imagine that this plant, this coral is still floating in the water, so there's going to be some flowy lines there. And this one's going to be the middle one. Okay. All right, so that is our coral on the side. So that darker. Now we're going to move on to create some more of these flowy seaweed-like leaves with a different color. So we're going to create a nice purple. So to create purple, we're going to grab our red that we have on our palette. If you don't have any more red on your palette, you can add some more. And we're going to add a little bit of that ultramarine blue. So red and blue make purple. Just a little bit. And we're going to mix them both here. So we want to add much less of that blue compared to that red. So just a little smidgen of that blue because we don't want to darken it too much. Right. Go, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add some of this pink that we added for the last step into here to just lighten that purple just a bit. So we can actually see it at the bottom because it's a dark blue. I want to give it some contrast. There we go. It's kind of like a mauve color. Beautiful. So we're going to grab that same round brush that we've been using for all of our seaweed and coral. We're going to pick up some of that nice mauve color, and we're going to paint some exactly the same kind of leaves that we painted in that first seaweed. Nice flowy lines. And if you find like this pink color is too similar to this one and you want to give it variation, you can always play around with that blue and darken it up if you'd like. That. going to lighten up even more to give some varying tones of that purple. Okay, so I'm going to add some here. Should be a little bit lighter. So it looks like there's some in the front and there's some behind. The ones in the front are going to be lighter. A little bit more to the side. We have lots of room here, so we're going to just take it over to the side over here. Okay. So once you're happy with the amount of seaweed you've added here, we're going to move on to our final seaweed, which is going to be an interesting pattern like that one right there. So these little spokes that are connected to this center line there. So for that one, I'm going to be reusing this color right over here, which we used for the lightest seaweed on the right. And I'm going to grab we're going to grab our smallest detailing brush here because the lines are pretty fine. And actually, you know what? I'm going to lighten it up even more, this green over here. I'm going to add in just a little bit more white. And we're going to clean off our palette knife so we don't muddy it up with that red, purple. And it's going to give us some nice contrast with that dark blue at the bottom of our ocean. There we go. So we're going to grab our smallest detailing brush and we're going to create those spoke-like shapes. So it's kind of like a bowl shape like that, and then there are going to be some other spokes that are rounded and radiating again from like a center point at the bottom. You can add some on the sides. And if you want, you can add little dots at the end of them to give it a little bit of a stylized look. Like that. And then we're going to have like a center line that's going to go right through those spokes. Like that. And then we're going to create the second one. And the second one's going to be a little bit smaller than this bottom one. So again, we're going to create like a nice little bowl shape. That. We're going to create more ones that are smaller in the center, maybe some that are wider. And then we're going to add little dots at the end, each one. Okay, and then we're going to continue up, going up. So we're going to continue adding that center line. And the next one. Go. So that's the final part of our seaweed at the bottom of our ocean floor. So I like to do, so once your seaweed is dry to the touch, you can definitely go ahead and just freehand in the starfish with your paint. But I always like to come in with a pencil and kind of sketch it out where it's going to go, the proportions, everything before I paint it in. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to grab a simple pencil. I'm going to sketch in my starfish. So I'm going to put it right about at the edge of this purpley seaweed that's coming from the bottom over here. So I'm going to just sketch in a rough shape of that starfish. And so the starfish has 5 spokes or points, vertices, whichever the official name is. So I'm going to just try to keep them and they're going to be rounded too. They're not going to be sharp.
right? Starfish, nice rounded edges. I'm gonna keep that in mind. And then I'm gonna create the bottom too. There we go. So that's my starfish shape. So to paint that in, you can choose any color you'd like to paint in your starfish. I'm gonna choose yellow because yellow is such a happy color. I love yellow. And we're gonna lighten up just a bit because that yellow is super saturated and vibrant. We want it a tiny bit muted. So grab our palette knife, clean it off, and just mix in that white and yellow. And also, as we were mentioning before, yellow is translucent, so adding in this white into our yellow mixture will get it nice and opaque looking as well. There we go. Now we're gonna grab our, we can grab our medium-sized round brush here because it's not overly detailed. We need to fill in the body of that starfish. So let's grab some of that nice, beautiful, vibrant, but still a tad muted yellow. I'm gonna paint that in. So remember, the edges of our starfish are nice and rounded. If you're freehanding it, there's 5 of these spokes. Oops. They look a little wonky too. That's okay. There you go. I'm gonna make this one a little bit longer there. So now we're gonna wait for the starfish to dry, and we're gonna add a little bit more detail to make it look a little bit more 3D and not so quite so flat. So while we wait for it to dry, we're going to darken up. We're gonna create a little bit of a darker yellow. So we're gonna grab a little bit of our yellow, and to make it a little bit darker, we're going to add its complementary color, which is, we can add a little bit of blue. It's orange, but we can add a little bit of red, a little bit of blue, just a smidgen on our palette knife. And it's going to become a little bit darker. So to darken any color, you can definitely add black. That's an easy way to do it too, but then it often muddies the color. So if you wanted a nice dark color without muddying it up, just add its complementary color in with it. So there, it's a nice darker version of that yellow. And we're just gonna wait for that to dry. That's still wet. And once your starfish is nice and dry, we're gonna grab our detailing brush, our smallest detailing brush, with that darkened yellow paint, and we're just gonna add in kind of like a skeleton of that starfish. So it's gonna be just a line radiating out toward, from the center of the starfish out towards each of its vertices. That is done. We're going to put our paintbrush away, and then you're going to we're going to add little dots on the edge of all of the whole starfish. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my paint pen because it gives me nice little dots. But if you don't have your paint pen, just grab some pure white paint with your small detailing brush, and you could achieve the same effect. So we're just going to add little dots on the light yellow portion of the starfish. Go. And if you want, you can add
a bit of a white line right through the center of those that darkened ones we created in the last step, just like that. And our painting is complete. I hope you enjoyed this painting this majestic sea turtle with an underwater scene. And until next time, sending you lots of love, peace, and color.